Folks, welcome to the Football Outsiders live stream. It's Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. I am Aaron Schatz, the editor-in-chief of Football Outsiders. Today, it's our Ask Us Anything show, which is like an Ask Me Anything show, only with more than one person. So whether you're watching us right now on YouTube or on Twitch, get your questions to us in the conversation, and we will talk about whatever you want to talk about regarding the National Football League. If you're listening after the fact on the Football Outsiders Podcast Network or watching this video, you should be here for the show at 1 o'clock Eastern every almost kind of weekday, not Tuesdays anymore, but, Mondays and Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. And then in the off season, I think 2 days a week. And we're going to figure out just how many of these live streams we're doing, but we'll keep doing them. And we have lots of good football to talk about today with Mike Tanier, as always, on Wednesdays. Bryan Knowles is here, our resident San Francisco 49ers fan, and Robert Weintraub is here, our resident Cincinnati Bengals fan. So the first thing we should ask before we get to questions from the readers is how each of you are feeling about your teams in the playoffs. Mike and I are out. Our teams took it on the chin. My team worse than Mike's team.
Slightly.
I liked our offensive performance a little bit better than the Eagles' offensive performance. But when you give up maybe the greatest offensive performance in the history of the National Football League, except for that game that was 73-0, I don't think you can feel that good about it. So my team is
Allen in the winged T, though. Ooh, that would be impressive.
Yeah. Instead of the winged T, it was the winged Josh Allen. So
it was wing everything.
Robert, so how does it feel for the Bengals to finally win a playoff game and prevent the poor, unfortunate Raiders from finally winning a playoff game?
Let me tell you, the air tastes sweeter, food tastes better, everything is different. I don't recommend any other fan base go through a 3-decade drought when it comes to playoff wins, but when you finally break it, it is something else. And, as for the Raiders, screw them. I mean, who cares about that team? It was a fantastic day all around. Of course, it wouldn't be the Bengals. It wouldn't be appropriate, really, to break a stretch that long without, heart palpitations, a near stroke on my part at the end, and a much closer game than really it should have been. I thought the Bengals probably should have won that game by 10 to 14 points, really, the way the game went, but it just didn't happen that way. And, they had some injuries on defense and were playing on fumes at the end, but got the big play right at the end, the emotional release that just exploded throughout Cincinnati and Bengals Nation. Those few of us, the few in the Hardy, scattered throughout the rest of the country and the world. It was really, it was something else, long overdue. And when you point everything toward winning just one wild card playoff game and make that, I think I compared it to scaling Mount Kilimanjaro at one point. It's not really the greatest sign of great health of your franchise, but we'll take it. We're on the upswing, and with Joe Burrow in command, all things are possible. So
it's the first step. And look, I mean, the fact is, we'll preview the game specifically more tomorrow, but we've got you guys here today to talk about your teams. I mean, the fact is, we can debate about just how good are the Titans, the whole thing about them being the worst number one seed by regular season DVOA. But I think that you would have to be a real Titans homer to suggest that Cincinnati would have rather played Buffalo or Kansas City.
Right. Yeah, definitely not.
Right? Like, despite the fact that, yes, Tennessee beat Kansas City and Buffalo during the season, if you look at the overall resume, Cincinnati got the matchup they wanted for the next round. They're in this.
Yeah, I mean, no question. All of us were feeling like this. What do you do? The first thing you do is it's like the Rorschach test. Immediately. What do you say? Buffalo. Ooh, Kansas City. Tennessee. Oh, we can beat them. I mean, we got the better quarterback first and foremost. A lot of other issues and parts of the game certainly favor the Titans, but when you have the better quarterback, you have a chance to win the game. I think we all know that. And, even though the Bengals beat Kansas City recently, that kind of works against them, really. You want to put off that rematch as long as possible. And Buffalo, obviously, as you pointed out, Aaron, are frightening at the moment. And Tennessee's kind of an unknown quantity with Henry being out. They work him back in. Who knows how that works? You think he'd be fresh and raring to go. He's always dangerous, and they run the ball effectively without him. But still, you'd rather play a team that runs it really well than passes it really well in general, as a road underdog, certainly. And as long as the Bengals can score some points, they'll give up some running plays and take that game script as it goes. They don't want to. If you're Tennessee, you're worried about falling behind because of the way you want to play. But if you're Cincinnati, you can fall behind and still be in the game right up until the end. So I don't think there's any doubt that it'll be a tough game. I'm not cocky about it by any stretch of the imagination, but as you say, of the three teams remaining in the playoffs, Tennessee by far is the favorite opponent for Cincinnati.
I will say the Bills are super scary right now, but in part because they scare me because I'm scared that they're going to show up with one of their bad days and make all of us who are promoting them look bad.
Right.
And in Kansas City, never easy, and they have their own ghosts exercise there, and then the Bills don't exactly have a sterling playoff record of their own, so they have some things to work on too. So if you're a Bills fan this week, you're definitely on tenterhooks, like you say. Bad Josh and bad Bills can show up at any point, but I mean, you have to be cocky after that performance on Sunday,
it was amazing,
or Saturday, I should say. Yeah,
Tennessee's after us a little bit, aren't they, these days, Aaron?
Yeah, but I think that I think that I've, in part they feel like I'm hammering them because I went and wrote about them and then ESPN asked me to write about them again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll do it again. But I mean, I did look, the ESPN article today is trying to look for the reasons for optimism. Mm-hmm. And there are, the power of the bye week, unfortunately, goes against the Bengals and in favor of the Titans. Yes. Right. I do think the Titans are a different offense with their receivers healthy. I think that the power of Henry coming back is a little overstated, but the power of A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, especially A.J. Brown, is not overstated.
Right.
But yeah, I've pissed off the Titans fans to no end.
Yeah, we go on Tennessee radio now. I know you were on recently. I've been on a couple of times, and it's a little bit like going into the Star Chamber a little bit.
Yeah, look, they just weren't that good during the regular season. They lost to the Jets. They lost to the Texans. Yes. It's not
right. You can't just line item veto these games and say, "Oh, that never happened. That never happened."
They had that sweet 4-game run early on. When most of the team was healthy,
right, and
they beat the Bills, the Chiefs, the Rams, and the Colts, and that was sweet. The rest of the season is, you can kind of pretend that their Week 1 blowout loss to Arizona didn't happen in the same way that Packers fans sort of go on as if the Week 1 loss to New Orleans never happened. That game was over 4 months ago at this point, so there's reason to not think about that. But yeah, we're not a big. We're not hugely popular in the Nashville area.
Fan bases and sports talk radio hosts exist to be pissed off. If there's not conflict, then what's the point? So I wouldn't, I would take that with a
My joke has always been, and this is not exactly true, but I've always felt like fan bases are so angry if you don't say that their team is the best one in the league completely, except for Steelers fans for some reason, who always seem to get angry if you do say that their team is the best one in the league.
We know better. We stink.
So, Bryan, how does it feel for the 49ers right now? You escaped the Cowboys. In the game, that was the closest game of the weekend, at least by DVOA. That was closer than the Raiders-Bengals game. Even though it came down to, let's be honest, even if that slide draw thing works, what are the chances of converting a 25-yard one shot for 25 yards? It's better than one shot for 40 yards.
Not better than 2 shots for 40 yards. And it's
I think it's better than 2 shots. I would actually rather have one shot at 25 than 2 shots at 40, especially considering the first of the 2 shots at 40 could be intercepted. But not with only 14 seconds left. I wouldn't want that.
Plus, against the Niners, you're always playing for that DPI and the free play on the 1 yard line.
Yeah, which they're more likely to call on a regular set of routes than on a Hail Mary.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm doing good. I've undergone an experimental medical procedure to erase the fourth quarter from my mind, so I'm on a very high note at the moment.
Eternal sunshine of the Niners' mind.
Just take that fourth quarter in that negative 100 whatever % offensive DVOA, put it over here, and everything is really good. Everything's great. I've said leading up to the playoffs that I actually did not mind a potential matchup with the Packers because of their run defense and all that kind of stuff. And this week I get to eat my words. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that is their weakness is run defense. And getting Zadarius Smith and Jair Alexander back does not help that.
Right.
So you do think San Francisco should be able to run on them. I mean, I think a lot of the questions right now are about San Francisco's health. And that's why we're going to have David Lombardi on the show tomorrow from Athletic to talk a little bit about what's going on with the San Francisco, especially this rumor that came out yesterday about Garoppolo's shoulder moving the line, which it really didn't move the line at all. But
the week 3 matchup between the Niners and Packers is really interesting because Elijah Mitchell wasn't playing. Deebo Samuel wasn't a running back. Brandon Ayuk was still in the doghouse. Juwan Jennings wasn't playing. So you can't really and Zadarius Smith was out and Jair Alexander got injured like halfway through the game. So you really can't take anything from the time when the Niners had the ball in week 3. It's almost an entirely new matchup, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah, when the Packers had the ball, they did well because they're the Packers and they're the great offense and they do well.
And it was a weird combination, like the Packers ran out to a lead, then coughed up the lead. It was a very unusual game, all told.
Yeah, the Packers had a much higher DVOA. I think they had something like 95% post-game win expectancy. They let up a big special teams return because the Packers never do that,
right?
And they had a couple big pass interference penalties that let the Niners get back into it. So you can look at it. Oh well, the Packers way outplayed the 49ers in week 3. So if they clean up those errors, they should win comfortably. Or you can go, oh man, the Niners got really outplayed in week 3 and they still almost won. If they can clean up some of their stuff, they should win comfortably.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's the game with the biggest line.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's the game where our projected line is the closest to the actual line.
Interesting. So we're pretty comfortable with the Packers moving
pretty
forward.
Comfortable with the Packers, yes, but it's -6 and because there was some argument in one of the DVOA articles in the comments about should I remove all of Week 18 for the Packers or only the second half of Week 18? I'll tell you a secret. The reason I removed all of Week 18 from the Packers is because that's a lot easier to do.
Yeah, whatever's easier, just go with that. Yeah.
But yes, they had starters playing in the first half of the game, but they weren't really trying that hard. And it doesn't change their rating that much to include the first half of Week 18. It's the second half of Week 18 when the Packers dive bombed that we want to ignore. Right. Jim Stickschulte says, while home field advantage has been lowered this season, I still found that the San Francisco, Green Bay, and Cincinnati, Tennessee spreads seemed low for teams coming off a bye week. Thoughts?
Not -6. That seems fine. Yeah. -6 seems fine.
The Tennessee Cincinnati one, I was surprised was not a little higher.
Yeah, 3.5. I mean, that's pretty much your 3 for home field and then a half. That's the national perception of the Titans. Like when people are mad at Football Outsiders about the Titans, this is the national perception of the Titans.
Exactly.
At this point. Like, oh, what are they doing as the number 1 seed? We forgot about them when Derrick Henry got hurt. So I think that's part of what they're looking at.
And I think what people assume is that even when they win and are impressive, they're not doing it by scoring 45 points and blowing the other team out. They're they're playing it close to the vest, and that's not the kind of team that has a big spread, generally speaking, anyway. So, and obviously Cincinnati has a powerful offense that can backdoor anything. So that's part of it too.
Yeah. All right. Question we got before the show. Enough about your teams that are still in the playoffs. Let me and Mike talk about our teams that are out of the playoffs.
That's what America wants to hear.
Boone's Pacemaker asks, both Mac Jones and Jalen Hurts completed their age 23 seasons, had nearly identical touchdown to interception ratios, and bombed out of the playoffs. Why is the media narrative for the Eagles, let's consider all options at quarterback, while Jones is being stamped a franchise quarterback? I do wonder whether Boone's Pacemaker is listening to a little bit more Philadelphia radio than New England radio right now.
Interesting.
Because I do think New England radio is fairly cognizant of Jones's, the drawbacks that Jones has shown. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I will say from the little bit that I have been driving around and listening to the radio over the last couple of days, everybody is really clear around here who the bad guy is. It's the defense. right? Nobody is like, why couldn't Mac Jones beat the Bills?
Right, but the defense was the good guy for the entire regular season.
Right, and then the last 4 games, but especially in the wild card, they were just horrendous.
Right.
What do you think? You're in Philadelphia, so you're in the Jalen Hurts discussion. Why do you think, and I do think that nationwide even, I think there's a little bit more discussion of should the Eagles be considering alternatives to Hurts than there is to the Patriots and Jones. Why do you think that is the case?
We could go into a lot of things. But first of all, I want to say at the beginning, I think Jones is better right now.
Yeah, Jones was, I will say Jones was a little bit better by DVOA.
Yes.
And even if you account for Hurts' running quality, and Hurts was the number 1 in rushing value for quarterbacks. Also, while they were the same age, it does mean something that it was Hurts' second season and Jones's first season.
Agreed. But what it does seem, and I was tweeting about this on Sunday, it's like a completely qualitative difference between the conversations. Now, and you're right about Philly radio. Like Philadelphia fans are ready to just completely toss Jalen Hurts onto the bin and put him on the Carson Wentz Express out of town, et cetera, et cetera. And all I can say about this, I mean, let's be blunt. I think there's some implicit bias about this. I think that there is implicit racial bias about this. I think that's part of it. I think that there are other factors, one of which is from the national standpoint, catering to the excitement of Patriots fans as national media is a plus. Catering to the negativity of Eagles fans is also a plus. Like both of these things sell. And there's another factor here, and that's one is the Eagles do have 3 first-round picks, so you can play this game about, well, they could draft whoever they want, or they can package the picks. Whereas the Patriots, I don't know what the plan would be besides Mac Jones. But all I can say is, like, in my mind, it's like, for me, like, what are the chances Mac Jones becomes a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback? Like, I don't know, maybe 40%, 50%. What are the chances Jalen Hurts does it? Maybe in my mind, it's 20%, 25%. But I am flabbergasted that it seems like, Mac Jones has already gotten the Tom Brady sauce, and Jalen Hurts is like we can't wait to get rid of him. And no factor in my mind really adds up to why that's the case.
CCX3 says, do you have DVOA splits for deep passes for Hurts and Mac? I just opened that up. Remember that DVOA for deep passes is always really high because you're taking out all the sacks and all the failed completions and all that stuff comes out.
Right.
But there's no question that deep passes Hurts was much better. Hurts 63% pass DVOA through 102 of them. This is of 16 or more air yards. Jones only a 26% pass DVOA and through 90 of them. So Jones is near the bottom of the league, where Hurts is a little bit above average on the deep passes this year.
Even though Hurts does underthrow a lot of deep passes. He does, when he throws downfield, it's not superior accuracy by any stretch of the imagination. But also, he's got one receiver, real true deep threat receiver in Smitty, and the rest of them are garbage. So there's a lot of factors there. But I'm guessing CCX3, you're probably surprised that Hurts has a really good deep passing number. Because if we threw that out to my Twitter feed, which is largely Eagles fans, there's a high percentage of Eagles fans, they would all be like, it's negative $1 million for Jalen Hurts because he's never completed one deep pass, et cetera, et cetera.
No, my worry would be the middle of the field thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Are they just not trying to throw to the middle of the field, or can Hurts not throw to the middle of the field? Like, you want a difference between Hurts and Mac Jones. Mac Jones loves the middle of the field, and Hurts is like, I hate the middle of the field.
Well, I think Hurts doesn't trust what he sees there a lot. I think he misses opportunities there. But sometimes what he sees is Jalen Reagor. So I wouldn't trust that. And just to be clear, if Jalen Reagor played for the Patriots, he'd play for the Texans. That's
we have Jalen Reagor. We have Jalen Reagor. His name is N'Keal Harry.
You have N'Keal Harry. He don't play. Exactly. He ain't back there muffing punts for you.
What if Jalen Reagor was a really good blocker?
Then he'd be JJ Arcega-Whiteside.
Then he'd be N'Keal Harry.
Yeah, I think there's also, when you compare the two of them, there's and you can go to what we've just been talking about in terms of middle of the field. Jalen Hurts at Alabama struggled in that area. Mac Jones was very good, and Mac Jones was the better quarterback at Alabama, and Jalen Hurts had to transfer away. And Mac Jones has Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, at least this year, on his side, and Philadelphia obviously is much less has much less of a resume in that department than New England. I think it all plays into it. Like Mike said, it's not just one reason why. I don't even really get the sense that people think of Mac Jones as a classic franchise quarterback in the way we were thinking about some of the other guys, some of the great quarterbacks.
I think there's a little fear
but
that 2 years from now, we're going to be thinking about him like, oh no, we're stuck going to the wild card every year. What's the decision? Well, I was going to say like Baker Mayfield, but Baker Mayfield sucked this year. Better than Baker Mayfield. More like Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, our Cousins, not bad.
If you don't think Mac Jones is a franchise quarterback, you weren't listening to San Francisco radio in about October, November as everything was going wrong over here. And when obviously Trey Lance was the worst pick ever because he couldn't beat out, Jimmy Garoppolo. Well, Mac Jones was doing great things with the short passing game up in New England.
I go back to the earlier point about we're taking so much of our cues here from fan bases and sports talk radio. We're supposed to be the analytics organization that cuts right to the heart. Forget all this radio nonsense.
I will say, Ben Volen, who's a Patriots reporter, had something this week about, the fact that the ex-Patriots quarterbacks moved on in the playoffs while the Patriots went out. And what would the Patriots have done with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback? And folks, Jimmy Garoppolo was not staying here. They were not paying both Garoppolo and Brady. If they had kept Garoppolo, there is no 2018 Super Bowl championship over the Rams because Brady is gone.
Right. Right. And I think going back to what Rob said, we're reacting to the fan bases. And I think in my mind, I'm still thinking about Troy Aikman in the Thursday night game. They've got the starter for the next 18 years. And that was where kind of Jones sort of calcified. And then he had the weak month of December and January and the playoff game and things like that. But it never reset, at least nationally, it never reset to be like, oh, Mac Jones was a very, very good rookie, but not the next Tom Brady. Whereas Jalen Hurts, we don't know about him. Oh, he's winning some games. Oh, he sucked against the Buccaneers. How quickly can we get him out of there? Which, again, we just saw Kyler Murray suck against the Rams. We saw some other really bad passing performances this weekend. It happens. It's not like the destruction of a young player's career.
And Aikman was shredding Hurts the entire game too. Like Aikman, he does carry some weight in a lot of people's eyes as a judgment of quarterbacks.
The problem is the rest of Tom Brady's career makes it impossible to make the comparison of Jones's rookie year to Brady's first year as a starter. Mm-hmm. But actually, they're really similar. Jones's rookie year is really similar to Brady's first year as a starter. You just have to accept that the chances that the rest of his career will be like the rest of Brady's career are less than 1%.
Right. Can we just take Brady out of all conversations from now on? I mean,
basically, yes.
The ultimate outlier in every category. I mean, it's just so fruitless to even bring him into these conversations.
Jim Stickschulte says, does McDaniels not being an interview candidate suggest that he wants to eventually take over in New England and that Jones can be developed into what McDaniels would want at quarterback? So many people have tried to read the tea leaves about New England and when is Belichick going to retire? Is McDaniels the heir apparent? Is Steve Belichick the heir apparent? I have no idea what the plan is. I do know that it is noticeable that McDaniels has not been a candidate for jobs this year.
The Colts thing a couple of years ago soured a lot of people. You do not want to get left at the altar in the last second, especially when you already had strikes against you in Denver and how you sort of ran yourself at that organization. I think it's weird he's getting no interviews because, the Raiders are somebody like, oh, yeah, let's try going down this road again. But he has burned bridges, I think, across a lot of front offices.
Yeah, I'll be very surprised if he gets a head coaching job outside of New England because of that. I mean, you when you accept the coaching staff, you hire your coaches, and then you leave.
Yeah,
I wouldn't consider a candidate like that, no matter how good his resume is. That just is beyond from a management level. I couldn't take him as my guy from that point on.
Yeah. And wasn't it implicit in that whole Colt situation when he went back to New England that it was sort of wink, wink, nod, nod? He's going to be the successor to Belichick. I mean, obviously, criminologists don't always get that right, but
similar to Brady, we have no idea when Belichick's going to retire.
Right.
That's
right. He seemed miserable last year. He seems kind of in a decent mood lately this year. He seemed like, yeah. Hey, I'm going to talk to reporters a little bit. Like, what? What's going on? They legalized it. Is that what's going on here? No, why you like this suddenly?
So, I mean, it's not like there's a declared Belichick's going 2 more years and then he's turning it over to McDaniels.
Yeah,
like, we have no idea how long Belichick is going to want a head coach.
Right.
Yeah. It's like Jim Boeheim as a Syracuse man. He outlasts all his coaches in waiting and just keeps on keeping on no matter what, because
Prince Charles,
that equity.
Just be Prince Charles forever.
Yeah.
Daniel Taylor asked us before the show, which team that finished last in its division has the best chance to win it next year? And we have a graphic for this, I believe.
Oh, good.
I have a graphic to show you which teams finished in last place in their division. These are the last place teams with their DVOA and rank.
This was horrible. This is nightmare fuel.
I think there is an obvious choice here for which one is most likely to finish first, and it's not the one that looks obvious when you first look at it. To me, the obvious choice is Baltimore.
Yeah, it's the Ravens. I mean,
yeah.
Speaking as the fan of the team that went from worst to first in that same division, it can easily happen again. And, they'd only be talking about a game or two making up. It's not like they were 3-14 this year.
Right. First of all, Baltimore had more injuries than any other team in the league.
Right.
Second of all, they've got their quarterback, and there's no discussion of their quarterback leaving, unlike Seattle. Right. And third is the competition in their division is Cincinnati and Cleveland. I think we can all pretty much forget about Pittsburgh for next year, given that they're talking about starting Mason Rudolph at quarterback, whereas Seattle still has the whole NFC West to fight with.
Yeah, process of elimination, we can throw the Panthers out the window because they're a poop show. The Lions might make progress, but that's not really an issue. Giants are a complete catastrophe. You can throw them out. Jacksonville, I don't even know where to begin with that. So, yeah, we're talking about – and the Jets. So we're talking about Seattle, Denver, and Baltimore. Anyone want to take the Seahawks on this? I don't. Anyone? Any takers?
Not with that division,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Seahawks. Should be better next year if
they'll be in the mix. I agree. Yeah, I just don't think they have enough. Here's the one X factor: if Aaron Rodgers does indeed leave Green Bay, all of a sudden you look at Detroit and say, "Hey, there's a miracle waiting to happen." They can improve enough, and Green Bay can plummet enough. Minnesota and Chicago being what they are. I'm not saying it's likelier that they're the most likely team, but just to throw somebody else out there as a potential. Even Carolina, if Tom Brady decides this is enough, and suddenly Tampa's back in the who's our quarterback derby, and the Saints are running it back with Taysom and Jameis, and the Falcons. They find a quarterback who Deshaun Watson goes to Carolina. Let's just say throw it out. I'm just throwing out the 2% variables, but you never know.
I will say Baltimore is the best chance here to go worst to first, but at worst they were 8-9, so it's not going to feel like they're going from worst to first.
Right.
If the question was which team's best chance to make the playoffs next year, I might lean towards Denver, because if Denver had average quarterback play this year, I think they would have made the playoffs in the AFC.
I think Denver had average quarterback play this year for most of the year until Teddy Bridgewater got hurt.
For parts of the year, at the very least. But, it feels like Denver is the quarterback away, is what I'm saying here. If they get one of the big free agent quarterbacks, or even one of the medium free agent quarterbacks that are being moved around, and they get someone, and they bring in a good offensive mind head coach, I like a lot of the supporting pieces the Broncos have. I think they are poised to make a jump. Just I can't get in the first place in that division when you've got the Chiefs, and then you've got Justin Herbert and the Chargers.
Main issue. Yeah.
We've also been poised for that jump for 5 years and waiting for that middle tier quarterback. And they keep aiming for the middle tier quarterback instead of doing a bigger, more a stronger thing to catch up to the Chiefs and to be a real competitor, rather than say, hey, maybe this will get us 10 wins.
Right. As witnessed by drafting Patrick Surtain instead of Justin Fields or Mac Jones last year.
Right.
Like as good as Patrick Surtain was as a rookie, and he was very good. CCX3 says the Seahawks should be ranked second in that division and could probably overtake the Rams as their defense crumbles. First of all, that's fighting words to Bryan. Second of all, I mean, the problem with the Seahawks is not knowing what's going to happen with the Russell Wilson situation.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the there in that sentence is a bit vague because you could
which there, right?
Yeah, which defense is crumbling? Well, the Seahawks defense has already crumbled. I think.
Yes. Yeah, so we keep waiting for the Rams to just run out of guys, and it's like I don't think next year's that year.
It'll happen. They're using all their draft picks, but that's not going away now. That's not going away next year. It'll be a few years before they go, oh, well, now we have nothing and we're rebuilding.
Yeah.
Right.
There will be a year where Donald gets injured.
Yes.
And their defense will crash out.
Right.
But yeah.
It will happen. It may not happen until 2028.
Right.
But it's just in the NFL, it would be very difficult to imagine a player going his entire career without a major injury.
Yeah.
Especially
And so it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's dark. Not as dark as wishing
Bringing me down, man.
Kirk Cousins on the Broncos. What are you doing, CCX3? What are you doing to us? That's nightmare fuel. Cousins on the Broncos. I mean, you're right. It makes sense, but don't turn the Broncos even more into the Vikings. That's just cruel.
I was joking with some Broncos fans during the fourth quarter of that Niners-Cowboys game. Are you not excited about the Dan Quinn, Jimmy Garoppolo combination coming in next season? Is that not exciting you?
I was talking to Cleveland radio yesterday, and we were talking about the idea of Kirk Cousins to Cleveland. And I'm like, he's sort of a better Baker Mayfield.
Nice.
And it's really hard because Kirk Cousins, as I keep saying, is the player in the NFL with the biggest discrepancy between his statistical output and what film study people think of him.
Right.
But what film study people think of him is that he is the product of his scheme. And whose scheme was that originally? That was Kevin Stefanski's scheme.
Right.
So if he's the product of the scheme, putting him in Cleveland might actually be really good.
Or it might make them the Vikings.
Or it might make them the Vikings.
Let's stop trying to make all teams the Vikings. Can we do that? We don't want a league full of Vikings. We want a league full of Chiefs and Bills, not Vikings. Stop wishing Kirk Cousins on.
There aren't enough quarterbacks to be a league full of Chiefs.
Right. Well,
The Vikings.
We
horn
didn't
is
even think
cool.
Josh Allen was going to be that quarterback, for crying out loud.
right. But we know Kirk Cousins is not that quarterback. So I mean, I get it. Send him to these teams that look like they're a guy away, but that was exactly what the Vikings thought 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That was it.
Here's another question that we got before the show from Wet Kitty Bandit. What teams would have been the 7th seed in the last 5 to 10 years, and should they have been in the playoffs? Because this kind of ties to Scramble for the Ball today, where you guys wrote about like alternate 7th seed possibilities and like, you know, what if sometimes we had 6 seeds and sometimes we had 8 seeds and it was based on win-loss records. And we have a graphic for this also from the last 5 years before they went to 7 seeds. These are the teams that would have won the 7th seeds each year. And in general, my reaction to this list of teams is, meh.
Yeah,
It's a mix of teams who are kind of like this year's Chargers. Like, that would have been interesting to be in the playoffs. So the 2019 Rams, you know, they were coming off the Super Bowl the year before. They would have been an interesting team for somebody to have to face in the playoffs. And stuff like the 8-8 2015 Falcons.
Can I put that my personal favorite on there, the 2017 Ravens? If they're in the playoffs already, we are denied the Andy Dalton 4th and a mile bomb to Tyler Boyd that put them out and the Bills in and cemented the relationship that continues to grow between those two proud NFL cities. And Kyle Williams weeping in the locker room. I just think it's funny. We have this question right after the wild card weekend where the general consensus was, 7 teams, really? Maybe we should go back to 5. But yeah, we can go.
Yeah, my reaction was after watching Arizona get killed, 5 teams, maybe we should be going to 4. Okay.
Yeah, it was grim.
Some of this is pretty rough. These are some rough teams. 2016 Titans, was that still Chris Johnson?
I think so, yeah.
I think it was. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So 2016 Buccaneers,
that Steelers team is the one where Le'Veon refused to play, right? And Antonio went berserk. Yeah. I mean, that was, who really even wanted that team was just dying to put itself out of its own.
The 2015 Jets is that one shot year under Todd Bowles where everything went right and Ryan Fitzpatrick played really well.
Until the last game, right? Buffalo again, where Buffalo took them out of the playoffs.
And did we really miss something this year? That year? That's one of the best teams on here. And did we really miss something by not having them in the playoffs that year? Like I definitely feel like 6 playoff teams was the right amount, and they didn't need to go to 7, and we definitely don't need to go to 8.
And there's probably in each of these years, there's a team like these teams or two teams like these teams
Exactly.
in the postseason. And we don't need more of those because that's what happens. You have greatness and then it sort of pyramids out. And then you have this big plunk of 500-ish teams. The fewer 500-ish teams, in my opinion, sort of the better because you know, all you get is once in a while this random blip where one of them gets an upset and it's like that, but that's not the team that we wanted to see necessarily. So yeah, you know, we used to let one of them in, now we're letting two of them in. And if we go to 8 teams, my God, we'd be letting 3 of them in.
I mean,
CCX3 says if you include the early 2010s, I'm sure this is all Chargers. It's actually not. The only year the Chargers would have been the 7th seed was 2010.
just feels that way.
Just feels that way.
I actually don't mind the 7th seed all that much. I mean, the problem is that not every year has 14 playoff quality teams. Some years have more and some years have less. And so if the larger you extend the playoffs, the more likely you are going to have some of those years where, oh, great, we have like a 7 and 9 team slipping in here. And that's fantastic. We all need that. But I don't mind occasionally when the 6 upsets the 1, the 7 upsets the 2. That's fine for me because you need a little bit of that randomness in the playoffs. If you didn't want that, just have 4 teams, have them play a round robin and declare the champion. But it's good that occasionally you have like, you know, the Jerome Bettis Steelers going through the playoffs on a run. It's good that you occasionally have the Giants coming in with a negative point differential and getting hot. That adds spice to the postseason.
Right, but those were 6. Those were 6s. Those were not 7. Well, the Giants were a division champion,
yes.
I believe, in 2011.
Don't bring up those
Steelers. The Jerome Bettis Steelers
in front of me ever again.
Yeah. I can't give you an example of 7 because it hasn't happened yet, but it will happen one day, and that will be okay. The problem I have with 7 is that it feels really, really strange to give one team the bye week. That seems like a massive advantage for the number 1 seed. When you had 2 teams with the bye, that made sense. When even back in the 70s, where you had the 3 divisional champions all have the bye, and then 2 wildcard teams playing each other, at least you could argue, well, the wildcard teams need to do one extra thing to get that made sense. 7 playoff teams just doesn't make any sense from a formatting point of view. Right. I don't mind the quality of teams getting in. I think we've gotten a little bit unlucky that the Steelers and last year's Bears have happened to have been those 7th seeds. But the fact that it's 7 and not 8 or 6, just 7 is an ugly, ugly number.
a lot of Steelers on this list too. Just as I look at this, like the Steelers.
Historically, it's ridiculous how often the 7th seed would have been the Steelers. Like if you go back in time, 2013 Steelers, 2012 Steelers. Mm-hmm. Like I did an article on this last year or 2 years ago when they announced the start of the 7th seed, and it was like by far the most common team that would have been the 7th seed was the Steelers.
Oh wow.
When you never have a losing record, you know, you're always right there at the cusp anyway, or at worst, right there at the cusp. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And I could actually see the NFL looking with that large Steelers fan base nationally, et cetera, saying, oh, if this is what we do, we scoop a team like this up more often, we get more eyeballs on the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, from a content creator standpoint and from a gambling standpoint and from the league, you know, it makes all the sense in the world that you do it. It's just you have to put up with a certain amount of direct games. And, you know, I think before they play, everybody's like, oh, cool, we get an extra game and there's a Monday night game. This is all great. And then when it's 28-0 in the second quarter, like, ugh, you know, put this out.
I don't know if it's just because of the number of blowouts, but I felt this way last year too. And I realize this is complaining about excess.
Yeah.
6 island games. 6 island games in a weekend is really tiring. And I know it's because I do this for a living, so I have to watch the ball. Mm-hmm. It's tiring to do 6 games in a weekend. It is.
And I know we are not putting roofs on in the winter, et cetera. Here we're watching football and it's a too much take, but that's exactly it. But of course, they're not doing it for us. They're doing it for fans who can take or leave certain games. But yeah, I was worn out. Definitely last year when it was like 6 right across, it wasn't even the Monday nighter. I was wiped out by the end of it. You know?
But I think doing the game on the Monday night was a success. I think doing the game on the Monday night is a lot better than the Saturday triple header.
Mm-hmm.
I think ESPN did a good job with it, having the Mannings do a broadcast and then having the Outside the Lines broadcast with the NFL Live team and the Vegas guys. That's what I watched. And it would have been better if it was a better game.
Right.
No doubt.
But if they're going to do the 6, I like having the Monday nighter.
Yeah, I agree.
Give yourself a little gap in between and digest those other games, and then you can ramp back up for Monday night. But, you know, we're complaining about this. Wait till college football goes to a 12-game playoff, and some of the direct, we're going to have to live with that.
But I go to that as a fan. So I take it, leave it. have an extra cocktail, all those other things. So again, this is the
The
inside
idea-
baseball, sitting around the media center, eating free food, complaining. But that's how we feel.
The top 4 teams would get a bye week if they do 12 teams in
Talking about college football.
right?
Yeah.
Well, they're still arguing that out, but yeah, theoretically, that would be the case. Yeah.
So the
And
teams that make it now would instead have a bye week, and then you'd have 8 other teams.
Right.
That'd be
And ideally, home games. Certainly, it'd be great to have home games in the first round and the second round, so you could, have a case where you have whatever Georgia going to Michigan and playing in Ann Arbor, or Wisconsin.
Right. And you could make a rule that at least one group of 5 team has to be in every year. So at least one of those teams has a shot, as ridiculously distant as it would be.
Yeah,
I like
it's fun, to have that underdog get that NCAA basketball quality to it, at least a glimmer of it, a scintilla of it.
I wonder how college basketball writers feel during that tournament in terms of being exhausted. By the way,
Oh, I've done it. It's tiring, believe me. You get those 3-14 games, at 9:30 at night when you've already seen 3 games. It's rough,
I did it very intermittently for 2 years, but not like you have to cover everything.
Yeah.
Did you have to cover what were you just covering everything at your site?
You do a site, yeah. I did 4 games at a site, and and the same thing what you just said. It's like then you remind yourself, hey, I'm watching the NCAA tournament and getting paid to do it. There's worse things in life. So, a lot of it is just it's white man's problems, whatever, first world problems. I mean, let's not really complain. And the same thing with the extra playoff football games. All right, so there's a couple of dogs, but at the end of the day, there's bigger problems in the world than that.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of people do feel like divisional round weekend is the best weekend of football, and there are really good games this weekend.
Always been the case. Yeah. I mean, even when it was 6, even when it was 5, wild card weekend, had dogs in it, and there were a couple of games like, ugh, really, let's just move on to the main affair, divisional round and championship weekend.
I mean, there were a lot of blowouts this year, but I don't think having the 7th seed is the reason why there were a lot of blowouts. And historically, there have always been blowouts in the playoffs, which is why I ran that best playoff games table that had things like when the Bills beat the Raiders 51-3, and when the 49ers beat the Giants 44-3, or it was the other way around, right? There's one game where the Giants destroyed the 49ers in 86, and then the 49ers destroyed the Giants in 93. Yeah. And there's stuff like
the Giants-Vikings game, right? That was in there.
And the Jaguars over the Dolphins in Marino's last game was 62-7. And I mean, there have always been blowouts. And I mean, this is one of the things I was trying to point out on Twitter was as much as I'm sure both Philly radio and New England radio everybody's losing their freaking minds about the future of those franchises. Mm-hmm. I think that the 2 young quarterbacks still has the future. Blowouts are not franchise enders. Like there have been lots of teams that didn't even have Joe Montana at quarterback that got blown out in the playoffs. And I mean, I brought up the example of the 92 Chargers got absolutely destroyed in the playoffs. And 2 years later, they were in the Super Bowl with the same quarterback. So
where they got absolutely destroyed, but still the point stands.
They made it to the Super Bowl,
Right. I mean, just 2 years ago, the Patriots lost at home to the Titans. They got crushed. Last Brady pass was a pick 6. He was out of there. It's like, if that's a franchise ender, and here you are 2 years later, you're back in the playoffs. It didn't end well, but I mean, come on, let's keep things in perspective. Any Patriots fan complaining about anything is grotesque, much less.
Bryan, we're going to have to do an update on the franchises, the Dynasty article, but does this mean technically by the rules of that article, the Patriots dynasty has continued?
It has not ended yet because they only had one down year in between. And you're allowed to have a down year every now and again. It's transitioning to an all Belichick dynasty. That's the connecting tissue at this point in time.
Interesting.
We'll see how the Patriots go from here on out. But yeah, if you just reload and don't spend forever in the wilderness, you keep going. It's like when the Niners went from Montana to Young. That's one thing because they never really stopped.
Right. They had the 1 year where they didn't make the playoffs, where they would have been the 7th seed, interestingly enough.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
I do have to readjust it for now the 7th seed because now as wild cards are getting more and more and more frequent, I might have to adjust the baselines a little bit for that.
Right. Todd Singer said on the anti-dynasty side, the Browns didn't make the playoffs this year, which continues the Browns anti-dynasty. Yes.
Yep.
Correct.
You're allowed to have one up here before you're anti-dynasty. And the Browns have not yet been able to string together 2 competent seasons. So, we'll see.
They congratulated me on Cleveland radio for our preseason pick that the Browns would have made the playoffs. I pointed out, by our numbers, the Browns were better this year than last year.
Wow.
They were better running the ball. Yeah. They were better on defense.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, first of all, that they didn't win as many games.
Expectations.
Second of all, that the thing that was not better this year is the most important thing on the team. And that's the quarterback.
Right.
Yeah, I wrote that essay for the Browns this year about how it's like, how could you have them, barely making or missing the playoffs when this is, the obvious threat to the Chiefs this year? And I went on several radio stations and said, look, it's possible, and our numbers, can be interpreted in several ways, but don't go buying those Super Bowl tickets yet, my friends. And, it played out the way we thought it would. We looked prescient in that case for sure.
Well, you have to ask if anybody else has questions. If there are other reader questions, we'll take them or ask us anything for, otherwise we'll come back tomorrow and we'll preview the big weekend.
It is big. I just want to say thank you for everybody for all your well wishes out there who gave me congratulations and texts with the exploding confetti and all that kind of stuff. Again, it feels a little strange to get a congratulations just because you finally win a wild card game by a touchdown over a mediocre team, but we'll take it.
I didn't think that's what you were talking about, but that's cool. I'm glad you got that. I'm glad I kept my mouth shut here. No, I'm glad you get that experience, man, because
now I would like to have. It would be nice to eventually see Detroit fans have that experience.
Agreed.
That's very true. Yeah, they deserve it.
How long has it been since Detroit has won a playoff game?
1991 or 1992 was it? So
it's 2, I think, because we were the longest, and I think they. Oh no, maybe it is 91. 91 season, 92 calendar year, I think it was.
Yeah. So it's been 30 years.
Rebuilding since 1957, the Detroit Lions.
Yes, Bobby Lane.
Here's one question before we go.
Yes.
Is it surprising that no new coaches have been hired yet, or is the process seemingly moving more slowly and deliberately than years past?
It is. I feel like
it's a little slower, but part of it is that the whole thing is postponed by a week because the season was a week longer.
Yeah. Agreed, but it seems like by now some team will have jumped on their guy. And no one is even close to it. Sounds like jumping on their guy. Incidentally, it was 1992, so the 1991 playoffs. The Lions beat the Cowboys, Troy Aikman, and the Cowboys with the help of Eric Kramer at quarterback, Barry Sanders at running back, etc. Final score 38-6. I don't remember the details of that game, but it must have felt a little bit like we saw this weekend with the Cowboys.
Yeah, and yet you know what? The Cowboys, not a franchise killer.
Right. No, that's right, because they were on their way up at that point.
Worked out okay. Yeah. Do we think, just to go back to that coach question, I mean, do you think that some of that is Jim Harbaugh related, and that people were waiting to see, with the smoke come out of the chimney there, whether or not he was willing to leave Michigan, and that meant he would be available for any of, and that might still be the case.
For the teams that might not be in Harbaugh sweepstakes, it may be that the coaches that they're thinking of upping to head coach are guys who are still in the playoffs.
Still around, yeah. And COVID has something to do with it too. I mean, a lot of this is sort of delayed by, how they can get these guys.
But there's been a lot of discussion of like Leftwich and Todd Bowles, and they're still in the playoffs. And McDaniel, I guess, from San Francisco has gotten interviews, and he's still in the playoffs. And
Brian Callahan,
Brian Daboll,
yeah.
And I know that the Bears are going to make this big, elaborate show of being super thorough. And Mara is going to be elaborate, super thorough, and things like that.
So, well, and also a lot of these teams have to hire their GM first in that scenario too. So they're probably thinking, let's get one before.
As you pointed out, Mike, today in walkthrough, like we don't know anything about these GM candidates. Like these are guys who've been in front offices, well, guys and women who've been in front offices who we don't really. You can have an opinion about an offensive coordinator's performance as an offensive coordinator, but you don't know anything about the assistant legal analyst to the salary cap guy.
Right.
This guy stinks, by the way.
And somebody can slide into our DMs and give us this dude is great, blah 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 blah. It's like you're just passing a letter of recommendation on, or you're passing on a piece of information. Heck, I could have had a drink with him or whatever. Oh, he's phenomenal, but like I don't know what he does.
Right.
Their bosses know what they do, they know what they do, and it's very much like a letter. You get to the letter of like of introduction from John Lynch or from Bill Parcells or from whatever, or Andy Reid, and that's what you go to these things with. But yeah, those guys got to get hired. When I said a pantomime of being thorough, I think they're genuinely being thorough. But like they're definitely want to put on a show of being thorough too for everyone and say, look, we interviewed this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, and that's slowing a lot of these teams down. I'm just surprised the very impetuous, like the Jaguars, who've had months to think about this, didn't impetuously jump on somebody.
Well, one thing is for sure, no matter how thorough they're being and how obscure the eventual hire, local sports talk radio will have an opinion on him, and it'll be negative.
And everyone will know for sure, what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. No.
Right.
Exclamation points at the end of every opinion.
And Todd Singer is right. The Jets and Jaguars have been to the conference championship game 3 times each since the Cowboys last were in the conference championship game. I was a little bummed, given that my preseason pick was the Cowboys to go to the Super Bowl from the NFC, and that I hold a Vegas ticket for that to happen. I was a little bummed. Now I need the Bills to go to the Super Bowl to make money. I
had Chiefs Packers, the classic. I mean,
still looking good.
But it's still certainly up there. I had Patriots Packers for 20 years, assuming Brady and Rodgers would finally meet at some stage in the Super Bowl. And it never happened, incredibly enough. So I'm just waiting for one of those two to get tripped up along the way.
It would be nice because we didn't get to have Mahomes Rodgers during the regular season.
Yeah,
now
COVID.
Yeah, that's right. And it does seem like it's sort of faded. You have to have the young gun, but maybe Josh Allen is saying I'm the young gun and not Patrick. But it does feel like the two of them have to have a duel in the street to finally decide who's the fast draw champion at high noon or at 6 p.m. Eastern time.
6 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish that was the Saturday night game, so I wouldn't be on deadline and I would just be in the bar like jumping in. But it'll be fun to watch again, no matter what.
You not find that you miss stuff watching in bars, just in terms of like details from the production or the something that Aikman or Romo or whoever are saying? Do you not? Miss
I never know what the announcers are saying unless it's like the Thursday night game. And
do you care? I guess
it's not usually what I do. I mean, like I miss. Anyway, I could get into it, but like having 4 TVs at 1 o'clock trumps anything because I know exactly what's happening with all these.
A regular Sunday is different. I mean, for the playoffs,
For the playoffs, no, I got to be at home or I got to be sober if I'm on deadline, guys. Yeah, but if I'm not.
Kessel 12 says, how are we not getting a Dallas Buffalo Super Bowl when Hollywood's favorite thing now is to regurgitate stuff from the 90s? We are regurgitating stuff from the 90s. That's the entire San Francisco playoff run.
Yeah, we got the Cowboys.
You're getting Dallas and San Francisco Green Bay.
And then the conference championship game would be against the concept of salary cap hell itself to complete the trio of the 90s experience.
Wait, the concept of salary cap hell itself is the Vikings, so that can't be done.
Well, because they're about to fall off a salary cap cliff in a couple of years. Maybe they would be the conference championship.
I just want to know which player is going to forget his helmet on the sideline in this year's Super Bowl to really run it back to.
I like it. I love it. Oh my goodness.
Devin Singletary, it's right here, buddy. Come on.
Coach Stefanski, thank you for showing up. We said nothing but great things about the Browns. Good to have you on the chat.
Good luck figuring out what to do about your quarterback this offseason.
Yeah, we have opinions.
Well, and now's the time. I mean, Cleveland didn't finish last, but they did finish tied with the Ravens, I think, at the end of the day. And they certainly have every possibility if they get even halfway. I mean, we should remember Mayfield was injured a lot this year.
Yes,
he's going to be in a massive chip on his shoulder.
The first thing I would want about Mayfield is I would want a doctor's report.
Yeah, right. You can never predict them in any capacity without knowing he's fully healthy. And even fully healthy, it's not like he's great, but they have so many other good players, and their defense played, so much better this year as to what we expected, and for the fact they had like 9 new starters on that unit. They're going to be a force. And if they get even halfway decent play at quarterback position, they'll be in the picture. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah,
unfortunately, but yes.
Yeah, he's our guy too.
Boy.
Oh my goodness. All right.
All right.
done.
I'm gonna close it up, even though the coach just arrived.
Yes.
The coach will have to watch tomorrow when we preview the tomorrow we'll be back to preview the divisional round games. We will have Tom Gower here, our resident Titans fan. We will be joined by David Lombardi from the Athletic San Francisco to talk about the 49ers. We will also preview the Sunday games. We'll have to check on that playoff quarterback thing at another time. Sorry about that, Hitchhiker's Pie.
Yes, yeah.
Come back tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, on all of these sources of content, Twitch and YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. Go 49ers and Bengals. Mike and I will see you again tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern.